I'm Alicia Jali. This is Media Monitor live on SABC News. A very good morning. We are live here on Channel 44. That's SABC News. And as always, let's kickstart the program with what is speaking headlines at 900 hours. Student bodies have vowed to intensify protests, urging all remaining higher learning institutions to heed the demands to insource their staff. Now, this emerged at a meeting which was held in Pretoria with members of the #OutsourcingMustFall campaign and some of the affected workers. Now, the threat comes after management of UNISA have agreed to insource its contract staff following an agreement with the workers' representatives. Dumelo Raseboyopie of the Uprising Student Movement says their plans are scheduled to kick in on tonight, and they will also target colleges as well as municipalities. Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi and KwaZulu-Natal Premier Senzo Mchunu say the commemoration of the Battle of Isandlwana is a way of promoting reconciliation and unity among the different race groups. They spoke at the commemoration of the 1879 battle in the Anglo-Boer War held at Isandlwana Mountain in northern KwaZulu-Natal yesterday. Mchunu and Buthelezi say the commemorations are a way of teaching future generations about the history of the Zulus and the British. African leaders could decide to deploy a peacekeeping force in Burundi unilaterally, despite Burundi's rejection of such a force. The African Union wants to send 5,000 peacekeepers to Burundi in order to protect civilians from the ongoing violence there. The port of Calais in northern France has been temporarily closed and services were disrupted after a group of migrants briefly boarded a ship. The city's mayor, Natasha Bochart, says at least 50 migrants in Calais boarded a ferry named the Spirit of Britain while it was still unloading. The incident happened during a protest at the port in favor of the migrants. The port has since reopened with sailing services returning to normal. Rio de Janeiro authorities in Brazil have announced plans to prevent the spread of the Zika virus during the Olympic Games later this year. An outbreak of the mosquito-borne disease being linked to severe birth defects has caused growing concern in Brazil as well as abroad. Inspections of Rio's Olympic facilities will begin 4 months before the Games to get rid of mosquito breeding grounds. All right, let's now have a look at some of the front pages of our Sunday newspapers. The Sunday Times leads with a story about the standoff between SARS boss Tom Moyane and Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan as South Africa attempts to put its finances in order. The City Press leads there with the headline about the Basic Education Minister Andrew Motshekga regarding the Riots Act to education officials, as well as calls for a new era in the education system. The Sunday Independent leads with the story of former DA parliamentary leader Lindiwe Mazibuko urging DA leadership to interrogate exclusive dominance of white males within that party. The Weekend Argus is leading with a story of a man who was spotted fleeing after deliberately setting a vegetation alight on a mountain outside Stellenbosch. A very good morning. My guest this morning are Mr. Lennox Ralebona. He is an SABC researcher, and on the line we will be joined by Mr. Sichaba Gankosi, a business reporter from a news editor. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Lennox, a very good morning to you. Let's start with you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Let's welcome Sichaba on the line. Sichaba, a very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Media Monitor.
Hi, good morning, Alicia, and Happy New Year.
All right, now let's kick off our program by starting with our first story. As the drought intensifies, South Africa's poor face rising food prices. And to kick off our discussion, let us have a quick look at the following insert.
Feed and financial help have been streaming in from the private and public sectors, as much as for farmers as for residents of towns without water. But a survey of over 600 farmers paints a bleak picture.
The need is greater than what one can provide. The farmers have already indicated that it's going to take them 6 to 8 years to get back into the current financial position where they were before the drought. So everyone is going to take a big knock, and the economy is going to take a knock as well.
Livestock losses are running at nearly 3 billion rand, with crop failures adding another 400 million. While maize prices have already shot up, the impact on meat prices is still coming.
As soon as it's rained and then the veld has had a chance to recover and the grass has grown, then farmers are going to hold back on their livestock. And then there's not going to be meat in the market, and then we expect meat prices to soar.
Disaster management authorities have renewed calls for a national response to the crisis.
And we would like to thank those NGOs for their contribution. And we would like to encourage all businesses out there and NGOs to do likewise, helping to the cause, because this is a collective effort.
With a recent report confirming that over 300 million cubic meters of water were diverted to power generation in 2015, some believe that the water usage priorities need to be reviewed.
You need water more than you need food, and you need water and food more than you need electricity. So I think there's going to have to be made some harsh decisions need to be made in prioritizing exactly where we should be using water.
South Africans have opened their hearts and pockets to help farmers and residents of dry towns, and the recent rains have also raised hopes and spirits. But experts have warned that it may take years for the agricultural economy to fully recover. Richard Newton, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Lennox, I'm sure you saw the media briefing on reforms on how, the various entities are going to deal with the current impasse when it comes to drought. But is the current interventions enough to save the situation?
I think the government is coming in a little bit late, because when you look at it, we started reading about drought maybe early last year, but government only started paying attention or briefing the public about the current drought at around September, when the expected rains didn't come as they were expected. Yes. So I don't know whether government is coming in late, or if the interventions are enough, or we should have seen the interventions earlier before the current situation
took over. All right. Sechaba, what do you think about this? Do you really think there was a way that we could foresee, what was going to happen in terms of the drought situation? And governments, then, how were they supposed to know what's going to happen in terms of the rains not coming?
Well, Alicia, I think the basic thing is that we know that we're not a country that receives much rainfall. I mean, we receive half the average worldwide. So we should have known better. We should have planned better. Maybe we should have even built more farms, more dams, so that since we know that we're this kind of country, we could be able to manage these kind of situations, because they don't come on and off as we like. We have to be prepared. So the government, yes, has come up with plans, but are they enough? From my side, I doubt if they are, because they sound piecemeal, and they are reacting to a crisis that could have been handled much better and much earlier.
Look, Sechaba, a lot of people are saying that the government should have put forward, contingency measures. But how do you preempt such a situation? I mean, it's nature.
Well, I mean, as I say, Alicia, for a fact that South Africa is not a rainy country. So that in itself should tell you how to plan. You build dams, you monitor the levels, and you make sure that in times of shortages or in times of rains where we don't receive, even those that we anticipate, then you're able to mitigate the situation. Lennox was saying, for example, the government started reacting in September. It's true. Our planting season starts around September up until maybe January. Yeah. And if the rains haven't fallen, then you know that you have measures. You can actually be able to supply farmers with water, because that's your key element of food security. So if you react after the crisis has started, you can blame nature. Yes, nature has got its own vulnerabilities, but the reality is that we know that we don't receive rain.
Look, very interesting, Lennox. Minister Zokwane was saying there that while we're speaking about, preempting the situation, he did say that it's a situation that forces you to react. So I really don't understand the issue here. Is it really the issue of infrastructure, or just government didn't have contingency plans? What is the problem?
I think if government had done research and worked together with
the various entities
yes. Like Agri-SA and
Water Affairs.
Grain SA, Water Affairs is also government. I think we wouldn't be where we are today, because now we're looking at, you look at the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, the Minister, Gugile Mkwenti, saying we have 187 million, and then the other department says we have 200 million to
put towards
for interventions. So, and then they go on and say we need to coordinate the issue so that there's the money is at the same place, not there and there, which means already the government itself is saying we were not really prepared. We were not looking forward to this. And this also, it puts our country into a very dire situation. As a result, we are facing serious food shortages.
And we're going to talk about that now.
It puts our food security into a difficult position.
Looks, Chaba, the Department of Agriculture announced that the country will be importing maize, and as a result, it is not expected to be cheap for consumers. Now, given that maize meal is a staple food to the majority of all of us South Africans, don't you think this is now going to cause hunger problems to some people?
Well, I mean, it's a problem that is going to have ripple effects throughout the economy. I mean, the value chain is such that under normal circumstances, we sell at least 60% of our produce to Southern Africa. But now that we are forced to import from outside Southern Africa, it means we're going to have to use a dollar-denominated currency to buy from those markets. And with the rand trading as where it is, it doesn't look good. And the other sad part is that it is not only the white maize, the staple food that we're importing. We also need to look at stock feed, and that's where yellow maize plays a part. So you're looking at importing something that will have a value chain from our stomachs to the animals that we're trying to keep alive because of the drought situation. And thirdly, the person who's going to pay for all of that is the consumer. And yes, your question then becomes, are the poorest of the poor going to be affected? Certainly.
Very interesting indeed. Now, Lennox, in terms of research, food prices are expected to rocket given the lack of production because of the drought. But are the consumers ready for this? What about the poor that are living below?
I think this is going to hit hard at the poor.
But why are we not seeing much of that? Why isn't anybody raising the stakes to say, listen, this is a serious problem and this is what it can lead up to?
As I listened on Friday when the Minister Zokwane and Minister Mkwenti held their press briefing, the question was raised whether this is are we going to declare the country this situation a crisis?
A crisis,
and then
yes.
he said no, we need scientific material to say this is a crisis.
Do you think that's the right approach, Lennox?
I don't think so, because as it stands, it's a crisis. For me, it's a crisis because the poor people who work in farms are facing job losses, which means that little money they had to buy food and other stuff, now they won't have that money. They will solely depend on government to hand over food parcels and other stuff. And already the government is talking about importing 5 million to 6 million tons of maize. How much is that maize going to cost in the country when it's imported? Whereas before, we were exporting maize to Southern Africa. For example, in Botswana, 30% of their maize they import out of our import. 30% goes to Botswana. And we have Zimbabwe, we have Swaziland, Lesotho. They all depend on South Africa. They import maize from South Africa, which means, and when you look at those countries, they're already in difficult conditions. So the poor are going to suffer going forward.
All right, well, it is tough to economic times. Thank you so much, Lennox. And of course, thank you so much to Mr. Sichaba Gankosi, who was joining us on the line. And in studio with me, it was Mr. Lennox Ralebona. And we're joining us and we're talking about the drought situation in the country. Will this be the end of the Fees Must Fall protest now that NSFAS has received funding? Stay tuned and find out after this break. This is Media Monitor.
They asked questions, all the questions that they needed to ask, and made comments that they needed to make. Generally, they are very warm towards South Africa. They are ready to go to South Africa. Many of the people who were speaking were saying their companies are in South Africa, and they are therefore happy that we are improving the conditions, particularly of the interaction with the investors.
Welcome back now to unpack the student financial aid saga. I'm very pleased to be joined by Matlaku Komane, our very own SABC reporter. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Alicia. Thank you for having me.
All right. Please remember that you can continue sharing your views on our discussions today on our social media page. We are on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. Now, student financial aid body NSFAS has confirmed it's already paid 1.8 billion rand so far to various universities for the registration of students. NSFAS says no qualifying students who have secured university entrance will be excluded from financial assistance. The strides are also being made to clear historical dates. Now, before we delve into that discussion, here's another look at an insert.
By the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Blade Nzimande, the NSFAS budget has been increased from 9.5 billion rand in 2015 to 10 billion rand in 2016-2017 financial year. Of this amount, over 700 million rand has been allocated for full bursaries in scarce and critical skills for the current year. This funding is made available through the financial aid offices at universities, and students who are enrolled in critical skills study programs, which include science, commerce, health sciences, engineering, and many others, should apply for this funding.
Stefina, there was 10 billion rand allocated to this fund, and then another 6 billion rand, and now 15 billion rand. Seems to be a lot of money allocated to NSFAS, but do you think this is going to aid the current impasse?
You'll understand that, Alicia, this money is not only looking at, it must also deal with students that are coming into the system and students that were in the system and that they are owing. So it might not necessarily do what it needs to do, but it will go a long way in ensuring that more children are able to make their way through the system. Mm-hmm. So the money in itself, it is a big sum, but you also need to understand how much education actually costs, because it's not just about free education, it's also the quality. the vice chancellors of Johannesburg University sometime last week had a meeting where they were telling us what it costs just to run some of their institutions. We're looking at paying staff. You know, to get good lecturers, you have to pay good money because the competition is very tight. These guys are internationally wanted. So those are the many things that this money needs to cover. So it's not, we shouldn't only look at NSFAS to give students money, but we should look at the problem, as everybody's been saying, holistically.
Look, I really don't understand here. All this money, 15 billion rand, who does it apply to? I mean, I think a lot of people are very confused as to when the ministers are talking about debt being overwritten, who does it really apply to then?
The debt that we do know that is getting overwritten is 2013, 2014, 2015 debt. And even in that, there's certain conditions.
But are these NSFAS students or just students in general in universities?
Mostly it's NSFAS students and those that are academically qualifying, because it doesn't make sense to pay for people that are failing and, you know, then the funds are going to waste. And there are those students that actually need the fund that we need to get through the system. And we also know that, you know, there's a bit of a what students have been complaining about is the missing middle. For example, the means test, the NSFAS means test says to us that and there has to be a combined household income of 122,000 rand in order for you, less in order for you to qualify for NSFAS. But then now that gives you, if you understand, if let's say for example you're earning 130,000 rand, you have 3 kids, that you simply cannot afford to pay over 70,000 rand in university fees and still take care of other children. So I know that they're also trying to review that, which will also go a long way in trying to establish exactly who qualifies for NSFAS. And we also know that government's been making a call to those that actually can afford to pay that which they can afford to pay, because it doesn't make sense to ride the system when you know that you have a 30% means. At least if you bring that forward, we will go further in ensuring that a lot of children actually get quality education.
You know what surprises me, Mashako, is the fact that we're talking about debt being written off, but there was an announcement that students that are actually not paying are actually going to be blacklisted. So what's going to happen to those students then?
Those are students, our understanding is those are students that are working. For example, if I had NSFAS and I've completed my degree and I'm employed,
so it's a payback.
It's a payback, which is normal. I mean, you take out a loan, you should be paying it back. It's only fair. And I think we've only been looking at free education and only looking at government and what government must do. But every student that has gone through NSFAS and managed to get out of the system and is employed has an obligation to ensure that they give back something. NSFAS is telling us that they're owed in excess of over 21 billion rand. Yep. That can also contribute to making sure that there's a realization of education happening for everybody. Absolutely. Because we know that as a developing country, education is important for everybody. But another development that has taken place is you'll see that the ANC in the province, in Gauteng, has made a commitment that they will assist with student housing, which will also help carry the billions that NSFAS has said that they have given and are giving to universities. Because we know another thing that's very expensive is accommodation.
True. Look, let's talk about now. I did a couple of interviews yesterday. Some universities have actually, the SRCs have taken that initiative to try and raise funds for their students. Let's talk about those campaigns.
Those campaigns are equally important. You'll remember last year, WITS was actually one of the pioneers in doing this and raising, I think it was over R1 million that they raised for students to help them register. But that also didn't prove enough. But because now we know that we've got different parties at the table, we are expecting to see better results. And that's actually a good initiative. But it also calls out to private sector to come in and try and see what they can also do. Because we know that private sector is making a lot of money and they can use this money towards their CSI to ensure that they also, they're also equally impacted by this, because, graduates come in and go out into the private sector, even the public sector. So we see a lot of that, and I think that's the call that everybody's making to the private sector, that this is not just a government problem or a student problem, but it has a ripple effect on everyone.
Look, speaking of a government problem, Mashako, a lot of people are saying this issue of student fees is now being highly politicized. Do you agree? What do you think?
Well, it's a very thin line because in order, as like I said earlier on, as a developing country that is political, we are a country that needs to see graduates, especially in the scarce skills, coming out.
Yes.
It's equally important for society and government and politics to be involved in all of this, because it's for the greater good of the country.
Absolutely. All right, and before I let you go, the issue of free and quality education, do you think it's going to be a reality in our country anytime soon?
It's possible. I personally, I think it is possible to get free and
What's
quality.
What's it going to take?
It's a lot of money. A lot of money.
More billions.
Well, there are billions. Like private sector is making a lot of billions. If they just put in their 10%, it would go a long way in ensuring that indeed that, like the rectors and the vice chancellors have said, that they need X amount of money every month to pay their staff. Mm-hmm. Now, if we're getting some of that from government, some of that from private sector, and those that can afford to pay, we are going somewhere. All
right, that is Mahlako Stefina Komane live to us here on Media Monitor. Don't go away. We will be back shortly after this break.
All of them have said, we'll meet at home. They are coming home. I met quite a number of them, some of whom were not even in the meeting, who were saying, we are coming. We'll want to meet you when you are in South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. I'm now very pleased to be joined by Mr. Stumo Dlamini. He is the COSATU president. Sir, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Machali. Good morning to your viewers. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much. Now, COSATU insists it will support the ANC in local government elections despite sharp differences with government over new pension tax regulations. COSATU is planning a strike action over legislation that allows workers to only access a third of retirement savings as a lump sum and forces them to convert the rest to annuities. Now, COSATU says its fight is not with the ANC, but with the government. The Labour Federation's president, Stumo Dlamini, says though their members are angry with the decision, they will campaign for the ruling party. Let's talk about those statements, sir. Let's clarify that you're not against the ANC, but you're against government. Let's talk about this. What is the issue of contention between COSATU and the new taxation law?
Thank you very much. Let me first acknowledge and appreciate the fact that we are receiving a huge response and a feedback from workers at large, but also communities who are saying we support the call COSATU is making. We are the widows in Potchefstroom who are suffering because of how we are being taxed when we're supposed to be accessing the benefits of our husbands who died whilst on duty or who have died. We are receiving feedback from other business people who are saying we employ workers who we feel that each employee goes to work to create and establish a legacy for his family down the line, that they can say, my father, my mother was working and saved so much. Now we can access that, what she saved. Look, the issue here basically is non-consultation or lack of proper consultation. I can give you one example.
Please go ahead.
At NEDLEC, we negotiate with the government on matters which relate to socio-economic issues, this one in particular. And when such negotiations have happened and there is a law that has got to be built in Parliament, there should be a report to Parliament from NEDLEC that says we've negotiated on this matter, this is how we've agreed or we've disagreed, before you can even in Parliament have discussions about what law you want to do. Now, there's no report that Parliament has received that negotiations have happened and exhausted at NEDLEC. That's
Look,
the
Mr.
first
Dlamini,
issue.
last week we had Treasury in studio, and I know you watched that show,
Yes.
and they did tell us that there was proper consultation. It was a proper consultation process with all the various entities. But you hear and you're saying this wasn't the case.
If you knew, Alicia, you should have asked Mr. Ishmael, where is the report of NEDLEC? Which was submitted to Parliament before they discussed the matter. So Parliament has erred on this matter, and consultation is a legal issue in this country. They've violated that. Two, whose money is it? You should have asked him. Whose money are they talking about? Is it government's money? No. There's history on the provident funds in this country. Workers realizing their situation at the time in 1973, in 1981, decided, let us establish Provident Fund, wherein we shall save and put our salaries on a monthly basis, so that when the rain comes, we can go there, use that money to deal with the situation we're facing at a time. Or when we retire or when we die, we'll cash in 100% of our savings in the Provident Funds and do what we have dreamed to do for many, many years of our hard work. That has been taken away by this law without consultation, without an agreement. Why didn't government acknowledge that perhaps workers would have said, instead of 1/3 that we must take, we want to take 2/3, and then the 1/3 we can get it on a monthly basis. That choice right for them was taken away by this. There was no consultation, there was no agreement, there was total undermining of NEDLEC processes by NEDLEC. The man that was speaking last Sunday here knows exactly that's the issue.
Look, Mr. Dlamini, a lot of people are saying that, this new taxation law is beneficial, and it's also going to try and encourage a culture of saving in our South African majorities. Give us your view.
Look, you must encourage people to save if they have an income. But if they have peanuts, what do they save? You must encourage people to save if they are able, at the end of their savings, they can then access their savings and use them the way they want to. Don't force retired people or pensioned people to save at that time and say, no, 1,000 rands per month will help you until you are dead. You will leave that money and there's nothing else when you're dead. But the last critical issue here is that this is the workers' money. It's not the government's money. We appreciate the savings, but we have argued as COSATU that, and there's an agreement in government on the comprehensive social security plan, which is what you need in South Africa, so that you are able to protect those who fall within the cracks of the economy because they have little salaries. 10 years ago, there was an agreement at NEDLAC that any retirement reforms without a comprehensive social security will be a disaster. That was agreed. But for the past 10 years, government has been muzzled, manipulated, prevented from doing so by Treasury, the department that was here. There are 4 departments that were tasked to deal with the comprehensive social security. It's social development as the lead department, it's Treasury, it's the Department of Labor, it is the Department of Transport. That cluster is given that responsibility. For the past 10 years, they have not delivered on this one because Treasury is rushing to access this money of the workers in the form of fund managers who will be the ones who will benefit on workers' money when workers are dead and left their monies there.
Look, Mr. Dlamini, before I let you go, I've got 2 issues now. A lot of people have said, COSATU coming out totally against this might affect the tripartite alliance going into the local government elections, but you have said that you still support the ANC. But now, what is it going to take for COSATU to move forward with this? How are you going to engage with government further to try and see or find a balance here?
Government must scrap this law. They must put it aside. Let's begin a new process which will see us having a comprehensive social security in South Africa with a reformed retirement arrangement that saves the interest of the worker in this country.
Mr. Dlamini, thank you so much for your time here on Media Monitor, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that was Mr. Stumo Dlamini. He is the president of COSATU, and he was giving us the union side of the story on the new taxation laws. This is Media Monitor. We're back shortly after this.
What we are looking for is an interaction after the visit to Davos to concretize some of the things we talked about. They are even looking forward, they told us, in a meeting of the CEOs. They are looking forward to the State of the Nation address, as well as the budget speech by the Minister of Finance, to be in line with what they had here as a message, because they say that will be very important for them.
You're still watching Media Monitor. Welcome back. Remember, you can still share your views on Twitter on our discussions today. Now, Lesotho's parliament is expected to hear the much-anticipated report of the Commission of Inquiry into the death of former Commander Maaparangwe Mahao early next month. The government has issued a notice of a parliamentary sitting on the 8th of February. Regional body SADC has given Lesotho until the 1st of February to say when the report would be published amid reluctance from the government. We're now very pleased to be joined by Ntakwana Ngatane, SABC reporter on the Lesotho saga. Ntakwana, it's been a crazy couple of months. The Commission of Inquiry has gone out there, and now SADC withdraws any dealings with Lesotho. Let's talk about that.
Well, I don't know if we should say fortunately that has now turned around, because following the meeting of Prime Minister Pakadita Mosisili and President Khama of Botswana, who's the chairperson of SADC, all of that changed. But also perhaps one should note that that was also following public statements made by President Zuma as well as President of Mozambique, President Filipe Nyusi, who is the chairperson of the organ for defense politics and security. And particularly, I think I should note that it is what President Zuma said about SADC publishing that report in its entirety. I think that moved Lesotho to take that report and promise or commit to publish it in Lesotho.
Look, Ntagwana, you've been dealing with the story since day one. Why won't the people now accept the Commission's report?
Well, this is exactly what the question is, because Prime Minister Mosisili has kept saying that he is the one who went to SADC to request SADC to support Lesotho with forensic experts, with pathologists to investigate the death of Mahau, as well as the Commission of Inquiry. So, but now his reasoning is that there is a court case that is challenging the Commission in the courts of Lesotho, and his stand was that the Lesotho courts should be allowed to rule on the matter before the report is published. But of course, SADC said, look, SADC institutions cannot be tried in member territories. Therefore, that contention from Prime Minister Mosisili shouldn't have stood. And this is exactly what SADC said in the communique.
But now, what has this done to Lesotho as a country? I mean, I'm sure the tensions are starting to boil. Ntagwana.
Well, particularly because in his statement this weekend, Prime Minister Mosisili said that not only are the recommendations not binding, that is the recommendations from the SADC Commission, but also that the Lesotho Public Inquiries Act gives him or the government the right not to publish sections of that report if they deem it to be of a security risk. So again, people are beginning to say, but why then did we have this commission going in the first place if we will have the findings and not have them in their entirety? But of course, there's that issue of the opposition as well, that is boycotting parliament. There are opposition leaders who are still in exile here in South Africa. And so again, will the opposition be in parliament when that report is finally published? We're waiting to see that.
Look, Ntagwana, what does SADC withdrawing, any relations with Lesotho for the moment, what does it mean for the country?
Well, first of all, I think one has to remember that facilitator Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has been quite instrumental. First of all, beginning with the troubles that began in August 2014 up until now, his mandate was renewed after Lieutenant General or Brigadier Mahau was killed, and therefore that would immediately mean that that would stop. Now, where would that put Lesotho? We have to ask ourselves. There's a lot of engagement that happens with SADC countries. I mentioned particularly recently a meeting of information ministers that met in Lesotho and particularly made an important statement to say that social media seems to cause a lot of instability in the country, and they would want to monitor what happens with social media and how it impacts the region, particularly to strengthen the member countries to have more information coming out of them. Now, it is things like that, the cooperation like that, that is instrumental in the member states that one looks at and says, well, that would mean that Lesotho would be without all of that.
Now, Ntagwana, you were there when that meeting was taking place behind closed doors, and eventually the decision was announced later on. But tell us what transpired there.
I'll tell you what, because the meeting was behind closed doors. Yeah. But I mean, we saw the leaders walking in and out. We saw Prime Minister Pakadita Mosisili of Lesotho walking out of that meeting with his delegation.
Judge Pumap,
yes, going out to perhaps consult and coming back. And when they came out of that meeting, you could tell that there was disagreement. And that is why we then saw President Zuma and President Nyusi of Mozambique coming out to basically say, look, as far as we're concerned, Lesotho is out of our books. And when August comes, we will recommend that Lesotho be suspended from SADC. So it was quite a heated SADC troika, if you like. And the members of the opposition from Lesotho were actually there to lobby SADC. And Mahau's widow, Mampanya Mahau, was also there. But of course, they couldn't go into the meeting. But this tells you the kind of interest that is on this matter.
Look, Ntagwana, a lot of people want to know, will Mosisili's administration now allow for the safe return of all the exiled opposition leaders and members of the security forces?
Alicia, he keeps saying that as far as he's concerned, the opposition leaders that have fled the country have no reason to fear anything. He repeated this again in his statement to the media after the SADC summit when he delivered his response to the communique. And he keeps saying that Tom Thabane, they are on cordial relations and they talk. He even said that Tom Thabane called him a few weeks back to ask him to send him water in Fixburg because there was no water. There was no water in Fixburg. And so he makes light of this. But SADC has come out clear to say that Lesotho should create a conducive environment for the leaders to return. And they maintain, the opposition, that they are under threat from the army. They maintain that as long as Lieutenant General Tladika Mudi is at the helm of the Lesotho Defence Force, they will be unable to return. But of course, you know that there are soldiers also who are in exile in South Africa. There are some who are in detention in Lesotho, charged or rather accused of the same mutiny that Lieutenant General or Brigadier Mahau was also accused of when he was supposed to be arrested and eventually killed.
Look, I love the fact that you mentioned Tom Thabane very quickly. Where does he stand in all these issues?
Well, at this point in time, I think particularly this week, that is the story that we're following to find out what the opposition says, particularly whether they will return to Lesotho now. If the opposition that is boycotting Parliament will go to Parliament and listen to this report, even if it's just to listen to this report. But obviously, I think this is the story that we'll be following this week.
Look, very quickly, I know they're going to kill me because of time, but I really want to know, what is now Lesotho as a country doing to try and gain back confidence in SADC?
You know, particularly the business community in Lesotho is concerned because, as I say, even if the situation is blown out of control or out of proportion by some, as the ministers of communication said when they visited Lesotho a few weeks ago, the reality of the matter is that the image of Lesotho is dented internationally. So a lot of the people that would go to Lesotho to invest or start businesses have decided to hold back in terms of doing that. So the business community in Lesotho at this point in time is really concerned about the situation. Wants it to be corrected. People differ in Lesotho in terms of what is exactly going on the ground. Sure. There are those, of course, who are indifferent to all of this. They keep saying that this is politics. They do not want to get involved in it. Ordinary people in Lesotho go on, but of course, they are aware of what is happening and they're aware of the plight of those who perhaps say they're persecuted.
Ntakwane Ngatana, thank you so much for being with us here on Media Monitor.
Thank you.
All right, that was our reporter there, Ntakwane Ngatana, and she was talking to us about the Lesotho and SADC issues. Now, Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza has told members of the United Security Council that his government will not negotiate with those who attempted to overthrow his government in May of last year. Nkurunziza has also turned down an offer by the African Union to deploy 5,000 peacekeepers in a bid to resolve the ongoing unrest. And for this discussion, we're now joined by Sophie Mokoena. She is SABC foreign editor, and she's live to us from Ethiopia. Sophie, a very good morning to you. Give us a rundown of the OAU conference in Addis Ababa.
Earlier in your introductory remarks, you spoke about the issue of Burundi. What has happened since we arrived in Ethiopia? An important organ of the AU met yesterday, that is peace and security. And we expect that among issues that they will communicate after the meeting, hoping that today we'll have a media briefing, it's the issue of Burundi, as you have indicated, that the UN Security Council visited Bujumbura this week, and we got information from our Kenya correspondent, Sarah Kimani, saying that there were mixed reaction in terms of the reaction to the visit of the UN Security Council, and we are hoping to hear the position of the AU on that matter. On the Peace and Security Council again, one expects that the issue of Lesotho was on the agenda, as you had a discussion with Takwana there, and we are hoping that should Prime Minister Pakati Thamsisidi come to the AU summit, we will have an audience with him to find out a way forward in terms of what has transpired at the SADC meeting. South Sudan, it's another burning issue. You are aware that there are efforts there to try to bring the two parties together to agree to form a government of national unity, but there's no movement. Of course, DRC, which is supposed to hold elections, will be on the agenda.
Look, now, Zuma's call for the joint AU response to the economic crisis, Sophie, how is that being addressed?
President Zuma is expected to make this presentation at the summit when he takes to the podium. He is going to call on his peers to ensure that they work together to address the challenges of the economy in the continent. You are aware that the issue of the drought also is affecting many countries in the continent, and therefore they need a collective effort to deal with these challenges, but also the economic challenges around the globe.
All right.
Leaders must work together with business, with ordinary people, and I think President Zuma is saying let's all work together to find solutions because we are all affected. But it remains to be seen. You are aware that these multilateral organizations, you have blocs and individuals who hold different views, who have different alliances with different countries. Therefore, whether everybody will be on board, we will see. But President Zuma chairs an important group or perhaps a committee that deals with infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important if you want to address the issues of the economy. You know that transport is the lifeblood of commerce. At that meeting, we are hoping that he will come up with the solutions, but take stock, since he was appointed to chair that committee, how far are we as a continent in addressing the issue of transport? But many countries are really making headways. When we look at Ethiopia itself, it's actually a construction site. There's cranes everywhere. We used to know Ethiopia from the Western media as a country with famine, with poverty, with hunger, but I can tell you the economic activities in Ethiopia speaks to a government, a leadership that is serious about addressing the challenges of the economy. They have been able to link Ethiopia and Djibouti with rail network. That speaks to how Ethiopia is taking the issue of economy and infrastructure serious.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much for giving us the rundown on the events out there in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. That was our foreign editor, Ms. Sophie Mokoena. Well, we'd like to now thank our guests for partaking in our discussions this morning. This was another live broadcast from here at SABC Studios. We're back next week, same time, same place. Catch us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and email. I'm Alicia Jadi. This is Media Monitor. Have a great Sunday.